86 is not only an underrated series, but it's also a series that you don't see a lot of people discussing all that often. Even though it's not only one of the best mecha animes that I've seen, but it's also a series that is able to handle the topic of war and shows us how not only is a person affected by war physically, but mentally as well. And at the end of the day, how everybody involved in the war isn't always going to win, and they're mostly going to be hugely impacted in a negative way because of war. And the character is able to show this very well of how much the war has affected their lives, and their mental state is none other than Shinei Nouzen, also known as Shin for short. Shin is a character that greatly shows us all throughout the story how even though this person doesn't show any emotion or shows very little, deep inside you can tell this is a person who has become so broken, and due to the many chaos, destruction, and tragedy that he has witnessed with his own eyes, has severely affected his mental state to the point that at any moment he could break and lose his sanity, which unfortunately is something that is not uncommon with people who have dealt with war all throughout their entire life. And Shin has seen everything that happens in war despite him being still a very young man. But of course, before we talk about everything that Shin had to go through, we of course have to talk about Shin's past and how he even ended up in this war to begin with. This all started when the Empire of Gaia declared an all-out war with its neighboring countries. These countries included the Republic of San Magnolia, the United Kingdom of Roa Garcia, and the Alliance of Wald. However, despite all of these countries being involved in war, there is one country that handled the war very differently, as even though they told their people that everything was under control and that they were getting involved in the war and trying to make sure that they were victorious, one thing that they kept hidden was who was actually involved in this war. Because in reality, the Republic of San Magnolia, the people weren't really fighting in the battlefield. They were actually getting people that they considered nothing but objects to fight for their behalf. You see, the people of the Republic of San Magnolia were considered albas. These are people who had the privileges to enjoy a very normal life. The people with silver hair and silver eyes are the people in the Republic of San Magnolia that didn't have to go in the battlefield and didn't have to worry about being discriminated, unlike people like Shin, who were considered the 86. Due to them not having silver eyes or silver hair, they were treated very differently by the Republic, and this of course not only created discrimination between one another, but this also created huge tension between the 86 and the Albas. But despite this, the 86 would be the ones to have always been forced to be on the battlefield and fight the war for the Republic of San Magnolia. And that is something that not only Shin has experienced, but also his entire family as well. The first person to enroll into the military was his father, and due to this was because of his father getting the promise by the Republic saying that if he joined the battle, then in return his family was going to have their rights restored. But this was nothing but empty promises, because unfortunately when Shin's father passed away during the battle and will be killed by the enemy known as the Legion that were created by the Empire of Gaia, the next person to join the military will be their mother, and once again she was filled with nothing but empty promises and joined the battle for the sake of her children. And ultimately, just like their father, their mother would unfortunately pass away during battle, and then the next person in line would be Shin's brother, Rei. Rei and Shin's relationship was just like any other sibling relationship. They got along very well, and it's very clear they care for one another. But during these moments when Rei found out that not only both of their parents are no longer alive, and now he's forced to now join the military as well, it's not surprising that this took a heavy toll in Rei's mental state, and things didn't get any better when, due to Shin being extremely young at this point in time and him not comprehending death and not understanding why their parents are no longer coming back, Rei went into a fit of rage against Shin, so much so that Rei actually nearly killed Shin with his own hands. But luckily it seems that Rei snapped out of it only after what he had done not only traumatized him but also traumatized Shin as well. And unfortunately, just like the other members of the family, Rei would also not only die in the battlefield, but he also seemed to have a fate worse than death, as he would ultimately be captured by the Legion and become part of the Legion, and ultimately this will all lead to Shin now being the last remaining member, and him of course being the one to once again be forced to join the military. But unlike his other family members, Shin actually managed to live and survive for a pretty long time. In fact, he clearly had the skills and the abilities to be able to stand out in the battlefield, that very quickly he not only rose the ranks, but will ultimately end up being the leader of his own squad group known as the Spearhead Squadron. But despite him having all this talent, things still weren't easy, because Shin also garnered a reputation as well, and this reputation wasn't all that great. There were a lot of nicknames that many people called Shin, such as the Undertaker being one of them, but there was one other that stood out more, and that was him being known as the Reaper. There were several reasons why not only Shin's group, but also many other people that knew who Shin was considered him to be the Reaper. The first reason being was because anybody that was assigned to be part of Shin's group didn't last long and would end up dying in the battlefield. The other reason was because anytime somebody that was a part of Shin's group was in the brink of death, Shin would make it his responsibility to end their suffering once and for all. Which, while it may seem that he wasn't displaying any emotions or he didn't show a hint of sadness with dealing the finishing blow, deep down inside, Shin really did feel huge sadness and did regret having to take this action. He did care for his teammates. He did care for the people that were around him. He got used to these people, so to see them go away just like that, when he built up a huge connection with the majority of them, him having to end their suffering for them is something that was not only hard to do, but something that he will never forget. Not to mention that Shin had a special ability of hearing voices due to him having good listening, and because of this, he oftentimes felt like he was hearing the voices of his fallen comrades, and due to this, the guilt inside of him built even more because he felt this was some sort of punishment for him to be reminded that he is somebody that can no longer have a connection with anybody, because no matter who they are, they will always have a demise if they are ever around him. This line of thinking haunts Shin deep down inside. He clearly just doesn't feel like continuing on. He has his moments in which he tries to throw his life away in the battlefield as if it's nothing, even though the people that are still with him don't want him to die just like that. They don't want him to think that his life is meaningless. They don't want him to believe that he has no value, because if it wasn't for him, most of them would have been gone a long time ago. But that is still something that Shin is not able to comprehend at this moment, and it's something that will take a lot of time for him to realize that his life is important. He does have the right to be able to live. And even though Shin had the habit of making sure that he didn't get too close with the people around him, that would all completely change when he would meet somebody that would not only impact his life, but he would also start to view things very differently. And that is, of course, Lena. Lena is their commander, and unlike other commanders who mistreated them and didn't view them very well, Lena clearly showed that she did care about the 86 and that she didn't think the 86 were just worthless people that had no value. She saw them as human beings, which of course is things that surprised Shin and as well as the other members of the 86, because Lena was considered somebody to have a lot of privileges due to, of course, her being part of the Alpha group that had silver eyes and silver hair. And while some members of 86 didn't get along with Lena, Shin and Lena's relationship was very unique, as they kept in contact numerous times, and over time you can quickly see that a bond between them started to form. And Shin would realize that even though Lena was considered somebody to have privileges, she wasn't perfect, and she too had her own problems, and she too was not somebody that understood everything that was going on, something which he can relate because he too was somebody that wasn't perfect, and he too was still learning and experiencing things along of the way. But despite all this, and despite his relationship with Lena increasing and being something more than just allies, Shin was still dealing with the demons inside of him, seeing all the death and destruction, and still seeing people that he knew and were part of his team die just like that was something that Shin was still having trouble going. And the more he witnessed all this, the more his mental state started to deteriorate. But there will be one point in which Shin will have to relive his past and confront it head on, and that is with his battle with his brother, who is now part of the Legion. At first, Shin still believes that his brother has a deep hatred towards him, and believes that even though his brother tried to kill him, it was still his fault, like he was responsible for what his brother did. But it would be during this battle that he would realize that his brother still cared for him and that he still wanted to protect him all this time. But now, due to him being part of the Legion, he is fully aware that Shin has to take him down, and Shin does exactly that, leading to Shin finally realizing that all this time his brother had no hatred towards him and he still viewed him as his brother. But despite this battle going smoothly, not all the battles will go exactly as planned, as during another Legion attack, Shin went back to his old habits, trying to sacrifice his life to protect his comrades. But ultimately his comrades would want to stay by his side, and at one point they all nearly died, Shin as well included. But thankfully they were all saved and were sent to the Federal Republic of Gaiad. And to make it even more shocking, this was originally the Empire of Gaiad, but due to a revolution which ended up not only being successful, in which the revolution ended up taking down the empire but also the royal family as well, this would result in a new society being built, a society in which everyone was treated the same, and a society that strived to do better things. The only problem is that despite them winning the revolution, not every problem was solved. They still had to face the Legion due to the refusal of the Empire's military to surrender. And because they had no officer alive that had a high rank enough to shut down the Legion, they now had to destroy the very thing that the people who were originally in power created. And despite Shin and the rest of his group that were still alive, given the opportunity to live normal lives and not have to deal with the battlefield or war any longer, this is just another example of the side effects of war. Due to them being constantly in war and pretty much having their entire lives being in the battlefield, they can't really say yes to having a normal life and believe that they belong in the battlefield so that they can take down the Legion for good. Shin, of course, is one of these people, and he's the one who strongly wants to go back into the war, and you could view this as Shin believing that he has no right to have a normal life because of everything that he has done and everything that he had to do to get to where he's at, still having the guilt inside of him haunting him till the very end. And just like before, the cycle continues, as during this time he will meet another character that goes by the name of Eugene, and while it wasn't a strong relationship, it was a connection that Shin gotten used to. But unfortunately, Eugene wouldn't last long, as right by his side, Eugene would unfortunately be killed in the battlefield, making the nickname the Reaper for Shin live on once again, and Shin having to do the thing that he hates doing the most, having to take the life of his comrade in order to end their suffering. And things get worse once Shin finds out that Lena's country, this being Republic of Magnolia, was attacked by the Legion. Shin believes that Lena did not survive the attack due to the report stating that not only did the country fall, but the country was left with nothing but just pure destruction from the Legion. At that point, Shin realized that maybe there was no point in moving on with his life, as the many things that he found purpose to keep pushing forward, the biggest one of course being Lena, was taken away from him. So in his already destroyed mind, he doesn't really see any purpose in continuing to be alive. Shin's drastic mental state declining shows very clear during one of their battles, in which you can see that Shin is just zoned out. He is not fully aware of what's going on around him, and it seems that his mind is completely gone. It's almost as if Shin is hoping that this battle that he is in right now will be the end of everything. He will no longer have to feel pain and suffering, and is hoping to join the people that have fallen before him. But that would not happen, because the aftermath after a very long excruciating battle with the Legion, Shin would come to find out that not only is Lena alive, but he will come to find out in this moment that Lena has become a different person and has now become even stronger than she was before. During their conversation, in which Lena has no realization that the person that she is talking to is Shin, she tells the person in the destroyed mecha that they don't have to be alone, that they can still move on because they are never going to be alone. They are always going to have something or someone that's going to strive them to keep going forward. And at that moment, Shin's eyes open, and he started to realize that his life wasn't meaningless. His life had a purpose. There is a way to keep going on with his life despite all the tragedy and everything that he had to go through, all the hardships, all the deaths, all the trauma. That is something that he will never forget, and that is something that is going to be a part of him no matter what. But as long as he acknowledges that there are people that care for him, that there are people that want to be with him and will always be by his side no matter what, that's pretty much all there has to be in order to be able to move on with your life. And once Lena and Shin reunite once again, this is not only a new chapter for the both of them, but this is mostly a new chapter for Shin, because despite the wars being far from over and the destruction and chaos will never end, at this point in time, Shin now realizes that that doesn't really matter as long as he strives for what he now wants to do, and that is last till the very end, until hopefully not only is the war over, but also wishes that he'll last until the very end with the people that are still with him. And that is overall Shin as a character, a tragic character that has dealt with so much death at such a very young age, and having to deal with it all at first all on his own, not knowing where the path is going to take him and not knowing if he wants to follow that path, always believing that his life was meaningless and always believing that his life was nothing too important that he should protect. But will come to the realization that he is his own person. He has the right to have dreams, goals, and ambitions, and has the right to move along, just like everybody else. And that's where I'm going to end today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.